Hey geeks and geekettes, it's Chuck Dixon here. It's Wednesday morning. It's time for me to answer questions from you, comic fans, about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. So let's get to those questions instanta. Kevin McDougall asks, when you create a new title character, do you think it's best to start with an origin story or jump right into it and tackle the origin later, if at all? Well, it depends on your intentions. I mean, there's a lot of ways to handle origins. The standard is to tell a story about the creation of the character, why they decided to become the character, or how they got endowed with these fantastic powers that they now feel responsible to use for good or evil. And, generally, these stories are a means to an end, and that end is to get the character up and running into his series of adventures. So it's just to establish motive, establish modus, establish the background for the character, what they want out of life, what their goals are, what their principles are, and then you just, roll on into the stories where they run into the army of supervillains that always seems to magically pop up out of the woodwork as soon as the hero appears on the scene. That's one way of doing it. Now, I'm working on a series called My Sister Suprema. It appears on Arctoons. It's a superhero parody in which a little boy, Randy Diaz, inadvertently gives his big sister, Cecilia, superpowers. And then he lives vicariously through her because she has no interest in being a superhero. And because of Cecilia's reluctance to take on this role, her origin is like ongoing. The story of My Sister Suprema is really a continuing origin story, as she isn't that thrilled about taking on this role as a costume crime fighter, even though she's got these incredible powers. Cecilia, like most teenage girls, doesn't really want to be the center of attention if it makes her seem different than other girls. And of course, being able to fly and punch her way through walls definitely separates her from the rest of her gal pals. So the story of My Sister Suprema is really the origin. And also because Randy and Cecilia have no idea the limits or the number of powers she's been gifted with, they're always learning more and more about this Suprema persona that they've created together. Another way of handling origins is to make the origin a mystery. I did a series called The Iron Ghost. Well, it was a mini-series, led to a graphic novel, called The Iron Ghost. It's a pulp action hero set during the Third Reich. And in the story, it's kind of a whodunit, or maybe a who is it. It's a mystery. We don't know who the Iron Ghost is. He's someone in the story. We know this from facts we learn as the story goes on. He's one of the characters that we've seen in the story, but we don't know which one he is, and we don't find out until the very end. And so his origin comes at the end of the story rather than at the beginning, as we reveal more and more about who he is, why he's doing what he's doing, why he uses two very special Lugers as his chosen weapons, all these things. And all the mysteries of the Iron Ghost are solved by the end of the story. So there's lots of ways to do the origin. You can just do the clean setup, get your character up and rolling, or you can make the origin more a part of the story. You can make the origin a mystery. You can make the origin a mystery forever. I mean, there's plenty of characters whose true origins we don't really know. The Joker, for one. It depends on what you believe when the Joker tells you about how he became the clown prince of crime. So lots of ways of thinking about it. The superhero genre is a lot more malleable than you would think at first glance. So there's a lot of room to play. Okay, this next question, I remember being asked this question. I can't remember who asked it. I can't remember where it was asked, but I liked the question. So I'm not going to, I apologize for not crediting this. Get in touch with me at brunobookstore.com, at brunobookstore at gmail.com, and let me know if you're the person that asked this question. But someone asked about modern superheroes. We can't see their eyes through their masks. There's always this white. They have white eyes. And why is that? I think the easiest answer is it looks cool. and they look kind of intimidating. We can't see their eyes. The eyes are the windows to the soul, as they say. And so we can't see the emotion of the character. Now, if you've ever been around someone in a really good costume, that hides the eyes, that has these white lenses, it is off-putting. It is intimidating. They used to have a guy in marketing at Marvel he was a bit of a gymnast, and they got him a really good Spider-Man outfit, and he would go to cons in it. They paid him to go to cons and appear as Spider-Man. This is before the cosplaying became a really huge thing like it is today. And he was like the official Marvel Spider-Man. And I knew the guy. I knew the guy from talking to him in the offices. But when he put on that costume and he would say, hey, what are you having for lunch? Or just having a normal conversation, it was off-putting. Even though I knew the guy, because I couldn't see his face, I couldn't see his facial expressions, I couldn't see where he was looking. His features were entirely masked. It's a weird experience. So it's kind of cool. Now, by the time I came along, it was understood that characters like Batman and Spider-Man and the rest, that the reason why the eyes are white is that there's these lenses that are part of their mask. And as I began writing Batman, I learned more and more about things that like Denny and other people knew about Batman's mask that I didn't. That these lenses served a purpose, and also things like Batman's cowl, his hood has a Kevlar skull cap as part of it, things like that, and even the ears are their antennas for a radio transmitter built into the mask. But I kind of played with the lenses even more by giving him a array of options for his lenses, night vision, thermal, all the rest of it, so that the reason that you can't see his eyes, there is a reason for it. And I remember when I was doing it, when he would switch to night vision, his lenses would turn green. So that was just one aspect of it. But there's a reason, beyond it looking cool for these characters. And I believe Spider-Man, it's the same thing. And also, Spider-Man, the way he's whipping around the city, you got to figure, Spider-Man in a good swing, he's getting up to 70 miles an hour swinging between one building and another. A lot of crap could fly in your eyes. You want your eyes protected. Unlike Captain America and some of the other masked heroes whose eyes we can see, Spider-Man's got a reason for that. And I believe in as the years have progressed, Spider-Man's lenses have also been modified quite a bit. So they serve more of a purpose than merely being goggles. Okay, Dorian at Roaring Steel Media. I'd love to see cars and guns depicted accurately to real life on the comics page. It's probably not important to the story, but those little artistic details give it some verisimilitude and make it more fun for me. It gives the fictional world of the comic a bit more reality, and I like knowing which comics artists know their stuff. Do you agree? Whoa, do I agree. I agree so big. I agree so much. I include a lot of visual reference. That's the cool thing about being able to do scripts now on a word processor. You can make visual reference part of your script, and I provide a lot of visual reference for anything I ask the artist to draw. And I also, on my cover page, the title page, invite the artist to contact me if he needs any more reference. I have tons of visual reference. For a writer, I've got probably as much visual reference as an artist has. Because I know, sometimes these guys need help, and I'm asking them to draw stuff that I have pictures of, and they don't. So why not include the pictures? Like this shot, it's Ron Friends, inked by Sergio Cariello. Frank is firing what is obviously a Tech 9. I give Ron points for it being a real gun. I'm going to take away points because I don't think Frank would ever fire a piece of crap like a Tech 9. And in his other hand, he has a Heckler Koch MP5, which Frank probably very much would be in favor of using. It's a fine automatic weapon and semi-automatic weapon, reliably German made. I don't know where the Tech 9 is made. Cambodia or something. I have no clue. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I want to see things look accurate. If you're going to draw the real world, make it look like the real world. I remember in the 60s and early 70s at Marvel, when the National Guard would show up, they were wearing World War II uniforms and carrying World War II weapons. And it used to really bother me because I'm like, this is not standard issue anymore. The helmet's different, the uniforms are different, and where are the M16s? They weren't carrying Garands and Thompsons by the late 60s and early 70s. They weren't standard issue. Things like that would really bug me. Bugs me even more in Westerns. I hate seeing Westerns that are set in like the 1860s and they're carrying guns that are clearly did not appear anywhere until the 1880s at best. So yeah, I want to see that kind of stuff. The problem is, some artists aren't interested in drawing guns, and when it comes to cars, some artists cannot draw cars. They are just terrible. You've got guys that do fantastic. You ask them to do a cosmic battle, between two warring galactic factions, and they'll just blow your socks off. You ask them to draw an ambulance, and it looks like a shoebox on wheels. Because they just have no idea or no interest in drawing accurate vehicles. Back in the day, there was a story. If you wanted to become an artist at Marvel, they would give you this 7-page vision story. And the thing about this story was it had everything in it that superhero artists or wannabe superhero artists try to avoid drawing. It took place on a 747 jumbo jet, so you had to do all that research and draw an accurate jet. There were lots of vehicles in it, and there was a broad cast of characters that included children, elderly people, things like that. So they were forcing you to, you could come in with this great portfolio and awesome pictures of the Hulk and Spider-Man and Captain America, but could you draw a reasonably attractive middle-aged woman, for instance? And if you couldn't, you're going to have to learn how to do that. You're going to have to learn how to draw the things you don't want to draw. And because Marvel very much was interested in appearing to be in the real world, even more so than DC Comics. So yeah, I like it when the artist does their research. It's why, Russ Heath, one of my favorite comic artists, and DC War comics being some of my favorite comics of all time, Russ's were my, I thought he was the best of the lot because he and John Severin would really do the homework. I mean, Russ, I talked to Russ when he was in his 80s, and he was just back from France, where he found that there was still an existing Tiger tank. He went there and took pictures of it, where it had been basically hit by a mortar round and left in a French farm field. He was all excited because he had taken all these pictures of an actual, full-scale Tiger tank, even though it was a rusted wreck at this point. And Russ would really do the homework. And Joe Kubert, also known for his DC War stuff, Joe wasn't as interested in doing the research. Some of his tanks were a little iffy, and Sergeant Rock always carried the wrong model Thompson. He always carried a civilian issue or law enforcement issue model Thompson, not a military grade Thompson, which used to bug me when I was a kid. And he didn't bother a whole lot with grenades, and his German uniforms weren't very up to par. Russ drew German uniforms, equipment, American equipment, all the rest of it, whatever he was asked to draw, as if he'd been there. Just astounding. So yeah, I'm with you. It's you got to do the extra work to make sure, especially in historical stuff and military stuff, that you're not going to lose readers, because the people that are reading the story, generally people reading war comics and Western comics are buffs of those genres. They're not casually reading them. So you want to make sure, especially in those genres, that you get it right. Creeper Weirdo, welcome back. On my quest to get on your show, Chuck, I have an interesting question. What are your thoughts of Nicolas Cage as an actor? Are there any other actors that are odd that you like or despise? I'm not going to get into who I like or despise, but Nicolas Cage, okay, let's face it, I don't know if he's a great actor or the worst actor who ever lived, but who cares? He's fascinating. He's a personality. And man, he's got to be the hardest working guy in movies. I mean, he makes at least 4 feature films a year. he must walk from one set to another. For whatever demons are driving him, whatever debts he has that have to be repaid, he has to keep making cash. I'm glad, and I'll watch any Nicolas Cage movie because you never know what you're going to get. It's like a box of Cracker Jacks. He's always going to bring it. The movie may not be any good, but Cage is going to be there to bring it, and he's got a wide range. I mean, he's got great comedic timing. He's believable as an action star, oddly, because he doesn't look like that heroic a figure for the most part. He can play the romantic lead. He can play the serial killer. He can play the cop who's after the serial killer. Just a tremendous range of talent, and it all depends on the quality of the film that he's in. But he'll surprise you. He'll make some complete steaming pile of crap. It's not his fault. He just signed on to be in it. They paid him what he wanted, and this guy's been in so many great iconic films as well, and a lot of his recent entries are really worthwhile. Some aren't, but he's always interesting. And obviously, millions of moviegoers and millions of people who rent Blu-rays and watch on streaming agree because he's sought after. He's in demand. He's got one project after another lined up. And you've got to admire that. You've got to admire that kind of dedication. And, like I said, every once in a while you'll come across a gem. Frozen Ground surprised me. It's a really good cat and mouse cop hunting serial killer kind of story. And John Cusack's very effective as a serial killer, which I never would have imagined he could pull that off, but he did. I know he's a great actor, but I didn't realize he had it in him. But he's really, really creepy in this movie. It's funny because this is a movie where I imagine they switched roles. Like Cage was supposed to be the creepy serial killer, and said, why don't I play the cop? Let's see what John does. Playing the Hannibal Lecter role, and I like to think that's what happened, But it's one of those ones that pops out, and it's a good one. Kill Chain, not so much. Kill Chain, I think they could only afford Cage for like 3 days, and they don't give him a whole lot to do in the movie, and it's slow. It's like watching paint dry. He's always interesting, but you get the idea he's as soon as the camera stops rolling, he's looking at his watch. Mandy is just the weirdest movie. And it's the kind of movie you can't make without somebody like Nicolas Cage. You gotta get somebody that's gonna go all in. It's a weird, freaky ass movie. I can't even begin to describe it, and you won't either after you're done seeing it. It's just it's the revenge action fantasy completely turned on its head, and pulled up its own butt, and psychedelicized. What can I tell you? And then, he does standard stuff like Primal. Primal is a movie. This must have been written in the 80s and just sitting on a shelf somewhere. And they pulled it down and says, let's see if Nicolas Cage wants to do this. And it's basically, he's a big game hunter. He tranquilizes the animals. He captures these animals to be taken to zoos. And he's transporting a bunch of them on a freight ship, and they get loose. And he's got to hunt them down. On a freight ship, in a storm, in the dark, and it's just this throwback movie, but it's so much fun, and a lot of the fun comes from him being in it. It just would have been a lesser effort. So where do I stand on Nicolas Cage? I never miss one of his movies. As far as his acting abilities, I don't know. Maybe he's just being Nicolas Cage in every movie, and he's got a lot of issues. I have no idea. He'd be a fascinating guy to talk to, and we'd have a lot to talk about because apparently he's a huge comic book fan. Huge comic book fan. So, yeah, there you go. Nicolas Cage. I'm sure all of you feel pretty much the same way about him. Okay, Dorian and Roaring Steel Media again. Was Dudley Soames influenced by the villainous James Ellroy character Dudley Smith? Both are evil, corrupt cops with an Irish brogue named Dudley S. Just a coincidence? No. Also, what is your opinion of Ellroy in general? I think he's the best novelist in his genre. His books are incredibly compelling, exciting to read, but profound in the deeper implications of sin and atonement, like a cross between a pulp novel and Dostoevsky. yeah, I'm not going to make any secret of it. And I didn't make any secret of it at the time. In interviews, I said that, Dudley Soames was very much influenced by the Dudley Smith character. In fact, the entire first year of Nightwing was very much influenced by James Ellroy's work. I read the novel L.A. Confidential. It's one of the few novels I read it, and then I immediately reread it. And I've read the opening chapter, I can't tell you how many times. If you've never read the novel, go to your local Barnes & Noble, pick it up, and at least read the first chapter, because it's a masterful piece of action writing. It just blisters off the page. It's amazing stuff. And, of course, James Cromwell was terrific in the film version of L.A. Confidential as Dudley Smith. Although I wasn't influenced by the movie, I was influenced by the novel. Dudley Soames actually appears in Nightwing, before L.A. Confidential was released as a film. But, for those of you who don't know, Dudley Soames was like a chief of detectives in Bloodhaven. He was corrupt as hell, secretly working for Blockbuster, who eventually betrays him and kills him, or thinks he kills him, by breaking his neck. He twists his head around like a bottle cap. But miraculously, Dudley Soames survives with his head on backwards, and he becomes the supervillain Torque, who continues to plague Nightwing and the rest of Bloodhaven for the rest of the series. And in looking for these images, I found out that Dudley Soames made an appearance on Arrow, the television show. I didn't know that. He was part of the Suicide Squad, apparently, for a short while, a few episodes. I'm going to have to look into this more, because I didn't see Dudley Soames on any royalty statements out of DC. So a little detective work of my own is called for. Mark Neer, he says, the one time I met with you and Bo and Clint McElroy, you told a story about being in Brazil and watching Airwolf with the Portuguese language narrator. Would you please describe that experience again for me? I don't know why the rest of this question got cut off. It was Argentina. I was in Argentina, and I was down there for like 3 weeks in Buenos Aires, hanging out with the guys from the Villagrán studio. We were doing a lot of work together, and they invited me down to meet all these different artists who I eventually ended up getting a lot of them work in the United States, ended up collaborating with a lot of them. It was a unique experience, just a bunch of terrific guys. But I would spend days and days and days hanging out in the studio. And in the studio, TV was always on. And they would always watch in the afternoon, they would watch these children's shows. And children's shows in Argentina were all hosted by what I can only describe as, hot babes, like Benitez. We saw, was it Susha up here? They tried to import her to the United States for a while. But one show was hosted by Julio Iglesias' backup singers, who were brunette triplets, and they all looked like, Las Vegas showgirls. And there was another show too, but they were all hosted by these women who, looked like bikini models. And they dress scantily and sing and parade around, and and then show cartoons. And they had a kid audience. Each show had a peanut gallery sitting in the bleachers, and they'd have magicians and clowns and everything else. But the center of the show, the hosts were these beauty pageant winners. And I remember asking Enrique one day, what the hell's going on here? All of these kid shows hosted by swimsuit models. And he said, there are many unemployed men in Argentina. To answer the question. And also to answer the question about why they always had it on in the studio. But I remember one day, one of the shows was coming to an end, and the announcer is announcing what show is going to come on next. And he says, it's El Helicóptero Fantástico. And I said to Enrique, wow, that sounds cool. What's that about? And he goes, and he describes the whole show to me. It's this amazing military helicopter, and the pilot goes around fighting crime. He's like a flying vigilante. I said, wow, I can't wait to see this show. And it comes on, and it's Airwolf. So that's El Helicóptero Fantástico. I found Argentinian TV amazing. We get Telemundo and stuff up here, but it's always Spanish language broadcasting. But in Argentina, they would run American television shows and movies, and they did an awesome job of dubbing them. I remember sitting through the first 30 minutes of Flashdance, assuming it was a film made in Spain, because the dubbing was so good, until I realized, wait a minute, this is Flashdance. Oh, Eric Morin. I just came across the Punisher, A Man Named Frank by accident. Damn that wasn't a fantastic story with great John Buscema art. Thank you so much for the kind words, and I agree, John killed it. He requested doing another Western with me. We had done one for Savage Tales, and he liked my Westerns. So, I love me a good revenge Western. Who doesn't? Any more Western comics by you out there for me to discover? Yeah, I don't get to do the genre anywhere near as much as I'd like to. And you're right, John did a hell of a job on A Man Called Frank. And we were even going to do a sequel, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. But actually, my first work at Marvel was Westerns. I wrote a bunch of Western short stories, 8-pagers for Savage Tales, when Larry Hama brought Savage Tales back as basically the comic book version of a men's sweat mag. And I submitted a bunch of Westerns, a bunch of war stories. Larry bought all the Westerns, and then asked me if I didn't mind, could he give them to John Severin, because he had given one to John Severin, and I found out in later years from Larry that John asked for, he said, do you have any more by this guy? So he just gave him all that I had, except one. It was a 10-pager. John Buscema came around saying, yeah, you got any Westerns? And he gave Buscema this 10-pager that I had written. So Savage Tales has, I believe, 4, maybe 5 8-page Westerns, 8 and 10-page Westerns by me. And, it's Severin and Buscema, so the art's fantastic. So if you can find these somewhere in the dollar bin or on eBay, they're worth checking out. I'm still really proud of these stories. It was my first entree into Marvel, but I was just in heaven. I was writing Western stories for 2 great artists. What can I say? Another one is DC, The Justice Riders. It's an Elseworld story. It's the Justice League recast in a Western, in the Western genre. I also did a mini-series of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, featuring The Man with No Name, with art by Esteve Pauls, and my favorite of all the variant covers are all by Sergio Cariello. And that was an absolute frickin' blast to work on, because I love the Sergio Leone movies. Big Clint Eastwood fan, and getting to work on something like this, writing a spaghetti Western was a real kick for me. I also did a Lone Ranger miniseries called Snake of Iron, again with Esteve Pauls. Always wanted to write the Lone Ranger. I've written a couple of prose stories, short stories, but I never got to do a comic until this one, so I got to scratch that itch, Kimasabi, and I really enjoyed this one. Not only writing the Ranger and Tonto, characters I really love, but I enjoyed the setting. It involves a train trapped in a blizzard and surrounded by Kiowa Indians on the warpath, and fun action stuff. I also did a couple of Western stories for Charlton Wild Frontier #1. This is kind of this was funded by basically a Facebook group of former Charlton guys. And when I found out they were doing a Western, I said, I've got a Western basically in the drawer, drawn by Eduardo Barreto. It was meant for an issue of Weird Western for DC, and then for some reason the editor forgot that he had assigned it to Ed and I, and so did not pay us, so we still owned the story, and the art was done, and it's artwork by Eduardo Barreto. It's actually one of the last stories he drew before he passed away, and it's artwork's gorgeous. There's also a Mountain Man story by me and Gary Quapis in this issue. So if you can find this one, Charlton Wild Frontier, it's worth checking out. As I said, I was supposed to do a sequel to A Man Called Frank, drawn by Russ Heath, and Russ did I guess he did most of the first issue. It was going to be a 5-issue arc in Punisher Warzone. And it's a shame we didn't get to finish it, because I liked the setting. It was Frank goes to hunt down Pancho Villa at the same time that General Blackjack Pershing heads into Mexico to find the bandit chief and bring him to justice, for crossing the border and shooting up the town of Columbus, Arizona, or Columbus, New Mexico. I can't remember which state. And Frank runs into Pershing, but more importantly, runs into a young George S. Patton, who was a lieutenant serving in the cavalry under Patton and under Pershing. And Patton was, if you've ever read about Patton's exploits in Mexico, he pretty much was Frank Castle. So it was kind of these two go head to head because, you know, when two people meet who are very much alike, they usually don't get along. And it's going to be Frank versus Patton. And Patton, if you didn't know this, when he was in Mexico, he liked Westerns. He read dime novel Westerns as a kid, and he had very much a romanticized view of gun battles and things like that. And he would often go off on his own. He would borrow Pershing's touring car and go off on his own. And a number of times, he simply challenged Mexican bandits to gunfights, in the street, gun duels, just like out of a movie. And apparently won all of them. And he would return to camp with the bodies of dead Mexican bandits tied across the hood of the touring car. And then get excoriated by Pershing for doing this, and promised never to do it again. And of course, immediately go out and shoot him up once more. He was living some sort of cowboy fantasy out there. And if you know anything about Patton, it seems so Patton. So it's a real shame we didn't get to do this. Now, if you ever want to see the pages that Russ did, that he completed, and some of them are in pencils, some of them are in roughs, you can go to chuckdixon.net and look for anything by Russ Heath there. And there's a lot of unpublished stuff there, a lot of unpublished stories by Gary Quapis, Kiki Alcatena, Flynn Henry. There's a lot of unpublished, particularly Marvel material you can take a look at chuckdixon.net. And other things, movie reviews, and a lot of other stuff that I talk about here. So if you want to reach me, if you have a question, if you have something you want to know about what I do, you can contact me at brunobookstore@gmail.com, brunobookstore@gmail.com. It's the fastest, most direct way to reach me. And if I might ask a little plug for myself, if you want to support what I'm doing at ArcTunes, if you're enjoying it and you want to help me feed my starving artists, you can go to Patreon and look for Archaven. And you can contribute $1, $3, $5, whatever you want. You have my undying gratitude for doing it. And these funds are only for me. This is the Chuck Dixon Slush Fund. They don't go to a general Archaven revenue stream. Archaven has other revenue streams. But this is one that I use to privately fund my creator-owned projects that appear at ArcTunes. This is how I pay my artists. And maybe even with your generosity, I might even pay myself someday. But that hasn't happened yet. But that's okay with me, because you're helping me create interesting content and keeping me rolling and keeping me in the game here. So thanks so much. And I thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I appreciate every single one of you, all the people who have subscribed and liked, and all the terrific comments and compliments, and all the fantastic questions. And we'll do this again next week. I'll see you down the road.